All right. So before starting today's session, so let's recap what we have discussed in the previous session, and then we'll move forward. So yesterday's session, we have seen like what is software and what are the different types of softwares, and we have understood what is software testing and software quality, and also we have seen the differences between project and product, and also we have seen why do we need to conduct testing on the application, and also we have seen the differences between error, bug, and failure. And finally, we have discussed why the software is having bugs. What are the different reasons? So now in the today's session, we are mainly focusing on SDLC process. Okay, so we are going to discuss few important topics, SDLC, and then I'll discuss about something called waterfall model, a spiral model, then V model. Okay, so as a beginner, so these things are very, very important to understand. Okay, so first let us start with SDLC. So what is SDLC? So SDLC means software development process model, software development life cycle. So this is a full form of SDLC, software development life cycle. So what exactly the meaning of software development life cycle? So let us take any company. So not only IT company, if I take any other companies. So normally what companies will do, so they will take some raw material and they do some process and finally the release some product to the market. Even it is a financial company or pharmaceutical company or IT company, whatever it is. First it takes some input and then it do some process, or I can say it takes some raw material and do some process and finally it will deliver some product or some medicines to the market, right? If it is a pharmaceutical company. Similarly, the IT companies also will take some requirement from the customer, and based on the requirement they do some kind of design the software, and after that they will implement the code or develop the software, and after that we conduct testing on the software and finally we release the software to the customer. So in each and every activity should go in different phases. Okay. So what SDLC means, SDLC is a software development life cycle, which is a process used by software industry to design, develop, and test the software. Okay, so this is a basic definition of SDLC. SDLC is a step-by-step process which we have to follow to deliver or to develop, test, and deliver the software to the customer. So if I don't have proper process, it is very difficult to achieve it, right? So we need to have some process. So if I take any company, there are three P's are there, guys. Three P's are very important. So one P is people, and the second P is process, and the third P is product. So these are the three main things, or we can say three pillars of any company, not only IT company. So what P, first P means people. So the company means there should be some people and they do some kind of development or testing, whatever. So people are very, very important. Without people, there is no company. So this is one pillar. The second thing is we have to follow certain process, right? If you want to achieve something, we should have some process and we have to go through certain stages and finally we can achieve the goal. So second P is representing the process which we have to follow in our company. So the third P is representing the product. So what is product means, finally whatever we deliver to the customers, that is called as a product or application. So if you want to deliver a product to the customer, the people should follow certain process. Then we can deliver some product to the customer. So these three P's are three pillars of any company. People should be there. There should be some process, and then we can deliver proper product or quality product to the customer. So there are three P's. So this software development life cycle is related to the process, which we'll normally talking about the process which we have to follow to develop or to design, develop, test the software or deliver the software. Finally, we deliver the software to the customer. So that is simply we say SDLC. So SDLC means it is software development life cycle, is a process used by software industry to design, develop, and test the software, and which contains certain phases. So the software development will happen in those phases. So what are those phases? Now let me just share a small presentation, then you can understand. So now we can just look at this picture. So here we start with the requirement analysis, and then we have design part, then development, testing, and maintenance. So these are the different phases which we have in SDLC. SDLC means software development life cycle. In every company, we should follow certain process if you want to deliver a if you want to deliver a quality product. So this is talking about SDLC, so which contains certain phases, or we can say it is a step-by-step process which we have to follow. So the first phase is a requirement analysis phase. So what we do in the requirement analysis phase means we have to collect the requirements from the customer. So we have to collect the requirements. We have to understand the requirement from the customer. So normally project managers or product managers will be involved in this particular phase. So they will talk to the customers, they will get the requirements, and they prepare certain number of documents will be there. So that is requirement analysis. That's the first phase in SDLC. And after completion of requirement analysis, the next phase is a design phase. So in the normally in the design phase, what happens is the designers will design the software. Okay, so normally, if I just say one example, if you want to construct a house, right, what you will do first, you will have a blueprint, or we can say plan. So that is a simply design, and later we will develop that. Similarly, once you get the requirement from the customer or client, the designers will prepare the design part. So they will design the software, how it should look like UI part and navigations and everything. And after completion of the design, development will start. So development, or we can say coding part, will start. So developers, software developers will develop the software by writing different type of programs, by using different type of languages. Okay, so this is the part of a development. Just a moment. Okay, so development, requirement analysis, design, and development. And the next phase is the testing phase. So what testing phase means, after development is completed, before delivering the software to the customer, we have to test it. So we have to conduct a different type of testing, like functional, non-functional, performance, security. So different type of testing we are going to conduct as part of testing phase. And normally the people who are involved in the testing phase, we can call them as a testers or a QA or QC. All these kind of people are involved in the testing phase. After that, finally, we deliver the software and maintenance will be start. So maintenance in the sense, we deploy the software in customer environment and they start using the software. So these are the different steps or phases which we have to follow to deliver the quality product to the customer. So this is basically software development life cycle. Every software development should go through certain process. That process is called as software development life cycle process. Okay, so this is a basic understanding. Now, so the companies follow certain number of models. So again, this is very high level SDLC, we can say, and companies will design or they follow different models. All these comes under SDLC only, but the approach, the way of following these phases are different. Okay, so what are those models? So the next topic, what I'm going to discuss is waterfall model, spiral model, V model. So these are, there are n number of models are there. All these models are comes under SDLC, but I'm just talking about the main models, like previously or traditionally, how the companies are following, what type of models they are following to develop the software, and now what kind of models or companies are following. So I'm just going to explain like advantages and disadvantages. And interview perspective, these are very, very important, guys. Okay. So we have understood what is SDLC. So SDLC is a step-by-step process which we have to follow to deliver the quality product to the customer. Now, by using this SDLC, the companies will design their own models. Okay, process model. We can simply say process models. So among them, the first and important model is waterfall model. So this is very old and traditional model. So when software industry started, the first and initial model they have started with waterfall model. Okay, so very, very old and very traditional model. So waterfall model, this is also called as a linear model. Okay, and if I just look at this picture, it seems like a waterfall, like flow will go down like this. Okay, that's the reason we can say this is a simple waterfall model. Now let us understand what is this model, how the software development will happen in this particular model, and also we will discuss some of the advantages and disadvantages of this particular model. Okay, which is very important for interview perspective. because even though we are not following these models in the nowadays in the company, but we should understand this previously how models were there and what are the drawbacks we faced, and why we are going to implement the new model. So nowadays we are not using these models, but still we have to understand what are the drawbacks in the model, why we are going for the new models. Okay, so all these models again comes under SDLC. The approach is a little different. Okay, so now let us start waterfall model. So what is waterfall model? This is also one of the model which is comes under SDLC, and whatever phases we have seen in SDLC, the same phases will be there, but the approach will be different. Okay, so again the waterfall model will start with the requirement analysis. Requirement analysis means what? Again, we will collect the requirement, or we gather the requirement from the customer, and we will prepare certain documents. So here the main important is a documentation part, guys. Okay, so documentation in the sense each and every activity we will document. Okay, in this model the documentation will play very important role. So documentation is very important. So in the first phase of requirement analysis, we will talk to the customers. So we will talk to the customers in the sense normally business people like project managers, product managers. These people will involve in the communication between customers and companies. Okay, so they will collect the requirements from the customer, and once they get the requirements, they prepare some kind of document that is called SRS document. Okay, software requirement specification document. So in that document they will document every requirement from the customer. So once the document is created, then system design will start. So what is system design means? Whatever the documents we prepared during requirement analysis, based on that document, the designers will be there. So the designers is again the different team. So those people will design the software, and they will prepare some high level design, we can say HLD, and low level design. Like basically they will divide the entire requirement into high level modules and low level modules, small pieces of softwares, and finally we'll integrate them. So the second phase is the design phase. In the design phase, what happens? Based on the requirement document, the designers will prepare the design document. So once the design phase is completed, then developers will develop or implement the software by based on the design documents. Because as a developer, if you want to develop a software, I need some input. From where I'll get the input? So based on the design, I have to develop the software. So the next phase is implementation or coding phase. So based on the design document, coding or implementation will start. After completion of implementation in the sense of development. So after completion of implementation or development, now the testing phase will start. So in the testing phase, what you will do is the tester will test the software after completion of development. And once the testing is completed, then we will deploy the software on the customer environment. So deployment is nothing but we'll install the software in the customer environment, and then they'll start using the software. So that is a maintenance phase. So this is all about waterfall model. Now, if I just look at this waterfall model, just understand the behavior of this. Suppose here, every phase, if you want to start a design, suppose the designer's team is there, and if they want to start a design, what is the input for them? Requirement analysis, right? Whatever the document, SRS document, software requirement specification document, which is prepared in the first phase, will be the input to the next phase. So each and every phase needs some input, and it will produce some output. So for example, when I take a requirement analysis phase, what is the input for this? The customer requirements. And what is the outcome of this phase? Requirement specification document. And the requirement specification document will be the input for the system design phase. And what is the outcome of system design? Design documents. They will prepare some design documents. And based on the design documents, so design documents will be the input for the implementation phase. And what is the outcome of implementation phase? Code. So based on the design, the developers will implement the code or programs or software. And once the outcome is software, and once they deliver the software, and testing will start. What is the input for testing? The software itself. Once the developer is provided the software for the testing team, testing will conduct. After completion of testing, what is the outcome? Like test cases, test plan, test results. These are the outcome of the testing phase. These are the documents which we have to prepare as a tester. And the deployment will happen. So in the deployment phase, we will prepare some documentation like installation documentation and functional flows, how the software will work, like user manual. So these things will be provided to the customer. And based on that, the customer will start using the software. So each and every phase is having certain input or it will give some outcome. That is the first point. The second point is, suppose if I want to start a design, right? Until unless the requirement analysis completed, I cannot start the design. What does that mean? Every phase is depends on the previous phase of the model. For example, design is depend on the requirements. Implementation is depends on the design. Testing is depends on the implementation. Deployment is depends on the testing. So each phase is depends on the previous phase. Until unless we completed this phase, we cannot go to the next phase. Until unless we completed that implementation, we cannot go with the testing part. So every phase is depend on previous phase. Okay, so this is a behavior of the waterfall model. So this is very old and traditional model the companies were following in the olden days. But now, what is the advantage and drawback? So because there are so many other models also came in the market, but why we move to the another model? So that we need to understand. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of water model that we will discuss now. Now come back to the notes. Waterfall model. So if you have any queries, guys, please put me in the chat window. I'll answer this. Okay. So waterfall model. Just a moment. Yeah. So waterfall model advantages. What are the advantages and disadvantages of waterfall model? So let me just write some advantages here. So waterfall advantages. The first advantage, 1, 2, and this is 3 and 4. So let us start discussing what are the advantages of waterfall model. If I just look at this, the quality of the product will be good. So because in waterfall model, if I just look at this waterfall model, normally this model will be prepared for long-term projects. Okay, so here the first point is quality of the product will be good. So why the quality of the product will be good? Because every phase we have a detailed documentation. So whatever activity we do, we will document it. So that will be very, very clear for the people who are involved in the design phase, development phase, and testing phase. So finally, which will lead to the quality product, because each and every phase we have a clear documentation, so that we can also develop and test the software, and finally we will able to release the quality product to the customer. Okay, so that is the first point of waterfall model. The advantage of waterfall model is the quality of the product will be very, very good. The next advantage is, since the requirement changes are not allowed, chances of finding bugs will be less. And one more important point, guys, suppose we got some requirement from the customer and we have started design and we have started coding, somewhere we are in these particular phases, but again customers came back and asked us to change something, asked us to change some requirement. Okay, that is not possible in waterfall model. So frequently changing the requirements we cannot accommodate in waterfall model. This is a fixed model. So once you completed requirement analysis and design, then coding, testing, deployment will go on like this. We cannot allow the new requirements, or we cannot change the requirement in the middle of this phase. Okay, because everything will be phrased, everything will be clear cut documentation. So the new requirements we cannot accommodate in this model. So because of that reason, chances of finding bugs will be very less. And if you are keep on changing the requirement, guys, so if you are keep on changing the design or coding, definitely there will be chances to get number of bugs. But here everything will be clear, the documentation will be clear, and we are not allowing to implement the new requirements in the middle of the process. So there are less chances of bugs we have in this model. That is another advantage. Since the requirement changes are not allowed, chances of finding bugs will be very, very less. So that is one of the advantage of waterfall model. So the next advantage is initial investment is less since the testers are hired at the later stages. Initial investment is less since the testers are hired at the later stages. What does that mean? If I just look at this model once again, each and every phase is having different team. Like requirement analysis will be different team, having different team, design will be different team, coding or development is a different team, testing is a different team. And at the initial stage of software development process, we don't need all the team members, right? Initial stage, we need only business people or like product managers and project managers. Then the designers we need. After completion of this phase, the programmers or developers are needed. And then testers we can recruit. Until unless we completed these phases, we don't need testers, right? So investment is very less. That's the point we need to discuss here. Initial investment is less because we no need to hire the people at the beginning stage. So whenever we need those people, we can recruit them, we can hire them. So that is the reason initial requirement is less since the testers are hired at the later stages. After completion of requirement analysis, design, implementation, then testers come into picture. So in this particular time, we can hire the tester. So initial investment is very, very less. That is one more advantage of waterfall model. And the last advantage is preferred for small projects where requirements are freezed. Especially this model will be preferred for small projects where the requirements are freezed, because every phase we have a static documentation, and every phase our documents will be freezed. We cannot modify the document again. We cannot go back and modify the documents. So if there is any requirement which are very static, which are not dynamic requirement, or which are not changing very frequently, in those cases we can go and prefer this model. Okay, so these are the few advantages of waterfall model. Quality of the product will be very good, and since the requirement changes are not allowed, so chances of finding bugs will be very less. Initial requirement is less since the testers are hired at the later stages, and preferred for small projects where requirements are freezed. So these are the few advantages of waterfall model. Now let us discuss drawbacks or disadvantages of waterfall model, because based on the drawbacks or disadvantages, the new models are coming into market. Because so every model, they are having their own disadvantages, and then people are using a different type of models. So even waterfall model also having disadvantages or drawbacks. So now we will see what are the drawbacks of waterfall model, or we can say disadvantages of waterfall model. Disadvantages of waterfall model. Okay. So what are the disadvantages of waterfall model? So let me write some notes here. Okay. So let us look at this. The first point, requirement changes are not allowed. Suppose the customer is given some initial requirement here, and we have started design and implementation. We are in implementation or testing phase. At that time, again, customer came back and asked us to change some requirement or asked us to implement some new requirement. So that kind of requirements we cannot accommodate in the middle of the development process. Okay, we cannot accommodate the frequent changes requirements. We cannot accommodate in your software development process. So that is one of the disadvantage of waterfall model. So requirement changes are not allowed because this is a fixed model. Once the phase is completed, once we move on to the next phase, we cannot go back to the previous phases. Okay, and the requirement changes are not allowed in the middle of software development process. And the next drawback is, if there is a defect in requirement, that will be continued in the later phases. So this is one of the important point, guys. If there is a defect in the requirement, that will be continued in the later phases. So what does that mean? Suppose in the requirement analysis phase, we have collected some requirements. Suppose if there is any problem or any mistake in the requirement, right, that will be again continued in the next phases, because requirement, based on the requirement document, design will happen, and the same mistake will be continued in the design. If the design is wrong, coding will be wrong. If the coding is wrong, testing will be wrong, and we cannot find those bugs. And if the testing is, again we will miss the bug, again that bug will come under maintenance, again that bug will be faced by the customer. So if there is any mistake in one phase, that will continue to the next phases. Okay, so that is a one of the drawback. And the next point is total investment is more, because time taking for rework on defect is time consuming, which leads to higher investment. So what does that mean? Total investment is more. Total investment is more. Why? Because suppose if you find any defect in the middle of some phase, like suppose in the testing phase we found some defect, and when I found defect in the testing phase, what we have to do? We have to correct the defect in the coding level. And again, the same defect we have to correct at the design level. Again, we have to correct in the requirement level. So if you find any defect in any of these phases, we have to go back to the previous phase and we need to modify the document accordingly. So that is again more cost. So that total investment will be more. We have to invest a lot. If you want to do some rework, we have to invest a lot. So that will cause the rework, right? If you find any defect in some phase, we need to change. Suppose in the testing phase we found some defects, accordingly we have to change the code. The developer should work on that. That is again rework. And again the designers will change the document accordingly. So that is also a rework. And we have to change the requirement, we have to correct the requirement, that is also rework. So whenever you do some rework, the cost will be more. Okay, so that is another disadvantage of waterfall model. And the last one is testing will start only after coding. Testing will start only after coding. What does that mean? We have only one phase of testing. So after completion of 3 phases, here we have a testing. So if we find any defects in the testing phase, accordingly we have to change the code or implementation, we have to change the design, we have to change the requirements. So we have only one phase of testing here. We don't have a different phases of testing. So the chances of bugs will be more. So that is another drawback. So testing will start only after coding. So testing team will not be involved from the beginning of the software development process. So the testers will be involved only in one phase after completion of the coding part. Okay, so these are the disadvantages of waterfall model. So advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so this is very old and traditional model the companies are following. So initial days of IT industry started long back. Okay, so now based on these drawbacks, the new models are coming up in the market. Okay, so because the drawbacks here is requirement changes are not allowed, because this is a common, right? If the customer is given some requirement in the middle of software development process, again customer come back and ask the changes some requirement, or they may give some new requirement. So these changes are commonly there. So we should able to accommodate those changes in our software, right? And here we have only one phase of testing. If you find any defects in the previous phases, that will continue to the next phases. So that is also another biggest problem, right? So to overcome these particular problems, we have another model called, they have come to the another model called spiral model, which is also called iterative model. Okay, so now let us start with spiral model. This is another SDLC model. This is another type of SDLC model. So are you guys able to follow? Please confirm in the chat window, everyone. So this is a spiral model. So next we are going to discuss about spiral model. Great. So spiral model. So what is spiral model look like? So let me just show the picture first and then let us try to understand. So how spiral model works. And again, the spiral model is also having some number of advantages and disadvantages. Okay. So to overcome the problems from or overcome the drawbacks from waterfall model, spiral model is implemented. Now let us see how the spiral model looks like and what are the advantages and disadvantages. Now let us start about spiral model. So if I just look at this picture, this is a picture of spiral. It seems very similar to the spiral shape. Okay, if you see the diagram, it is a spiral. So this is a picture of spiral model, guys. Okay, now let us understand how this spiral model works, and then we will discuss advantages and disadvantages. So here, if I just look at here, some terminology like risk analysis, engineering and execution, evaluation, planning. So these are all normal terms like uh, requirement analysis, design, coding, testing. It is the same. Okay. So here, planning in the sense requirement analysis. Okay. Planning in the sense is a simply a requirement analysis. Let me just write the notes. So here planning in the sense requirement analysis. And after planning, after requirement analysis, we will design the code. So again, risk analysis is comes under like after completion of requirement analysis. In the risk analysis, we will plan like how much risk is involved, like how many developers are required, how many testers are required. Like we will analyze in detail. So that is comes under risk analysis. So these two basically comes under requirement analysis and everything. And engineering and execution means what? It is basically design and development phase. So this particular area which is talking about design and development, and this particular area is talking about the testing. Okay, testing phase. This is it. So four parts we have. The first part is a requirement analysis phase. Okay, so these two, and the design and testing, requirement, design and testing. So design and development comes under one phase here. Okay, so let us try to understand this, how this spiral model works. So the first part, again, same SDLC process will be there. So first requirement analysis or collect the requirements, and the design, coding, testing, maintenance. So these phases are common. So here the terminology is different, the process is same. So initial level, first we will estimate some cost and we'll do some planning. So this particular part, whatever you can see here, this part is a planning, means requirement analysis and understanding the risk analysis and budget, cost, everything we will think about. So that is the first phase. After completion of this, development and coding will start. So development and testing. So here, development and testing, and then we will release the software to the customer evaluation. So one cycle is completed like this. Once you reach here, in one cycle, requirement analysis, design, coding, testing, and maintenance. So one cycle will be having all five phases. And once we reach it here, we deliver one software to the customer. One version of the software we will deliver to the customer. Again, on top of this, the customer will give you few more requirements. Then on top of the software, again we do requirement analysis, design, testing, and coding in the second cycle. And again in the second cycle, we will release another software to the customer. Let us say version number 2. And again we will take the new requirements. Again we will implement the new requirements on top of existing software. Again requirement, design, coding, testing will start, and we will release another version of software in the next cycle, that is version number 3. So in every cycle, we will follow the SDLC process. In every cycle, we do requirement analysis, design, coding, testing, and maintenance. So each and every cycle will follow the same kind of process, but the process will be followed in the different cycles. Okay, so this is a behavior of the spiral model. And if I just look at this, we are able to accommodate the customer requirements, some new requirements. Suppose the customer is given initially 10 requirements, and for these 10 requirements, we will complete one cycle, and then we will deliver one software to the customer, and he will keep on working on these 10 features. The first version is released. And again, customer came back and introduced 5 new requirements. And in second cycle, we will implement the 5 new requirements on top of existing software. That's the second cycle. And similarly, even the customer is having some changes. Suppose he's come back and introduce some new changes in the old requirement, then he can also change the requirement in the second cycle. So what is an advantage of this model here is, the main intention of introducing this model is to accommodate the new requirements and also accommodate the frequently changing requirements. Okay, so in each and every cycle, after completion of every cycle, we will release a new software to the customer. And we can also accommodate the new requirements or changes of requirements after completion of every cycle. And this cycle will be continued endlessly. Still, the as soon as we have completed requirement from the customer, then we can still continue this spiral model. Especially this model is preferred for product based companies, guys, because what is product is a software which is developed based on the market requirements, right? So every time the market requirements will be changed, and accordingly we have to implement the new features in the software also. So this model is especially suitable for products, like product based companies will follow this model. And each and every cycle of iteration, the new software will be released to the market. And for example, guys, suppose if you take any software in the market, if you take any product, let's say WhatsApp, this is our application in our mobile, right? WhatsApp. So initial days, WhatsApp is having very less number of features. After that, what happened? Every time we are getting some upgrades. So what is upgrade means? The new features. So based on the customer requirement, they'll implement the new features on top of existing functionality or existing software. Then they'll release the new software to the customer. So in iterator model, so this is comes under iterator model. You can say iterator means it is repeating again and again. The same number of phases will be repeating again and again with the new requirements. Okay. So especially this is suitable for products. So suppose Microsoft products. So we have Windows operating system. So in the olden days, we have Windows 98, Windows 2000, Windows 2005, Windows 10. So there are different versions are there. And that is possible only through iterations. Based on the customer requirements, we collected the market requirements and we have implemented those features on top of the software. So this is the spiral model. So each and every cycle, we will release a piece of software to the customer. Not a piece of software, but at that particular time, whatever the number of requirements we have from the customer, all the requirements we will deliver to the customer. After that, we will take the new requirement from the customer. Okay. So this is module. Actually, whatever the software we have implemented in the first cycle, that is one module. And whatever the requirement we have implemented in the second cycle, that is a second module, third module. So in every cycle, we will release a new module. Okay. So this is a spiral model. So software development will happen in the cycles. Okay. So now let us understand what are the advantages and disadvantages of this particular model. Now come back to the notes. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of the spiral model? So I already told you a few points here. Let me just put here. The spiral model is iterative model. As I said, every cycle is nothing but a iteration. So repeated multiple times is called iteration. So spiral model is iterative model. Why we are calling iterative model? Because all the software development activities will happen in the repetition model. So we say iterative model, and which is also called version control model, guys, because in each and every cycle, we are releasing one version of the software to the customer. So which is also called as a version control models. Okay, so spiral model overcomes the drawbacks of waterfall model. So what are the drawbacks we discuss in the waterfall model? Requirement changes are not allowed, but here the requirement changes are allowed. Okay, so spiral model is overcome drawbacks of waterfall model. And we follow spiral model whenever there is a dependency on the modules. This is one of the important points, guys. So when we have to go for spiral model, so we follow the spiral model whenever there is a dependency on the model. What does that mean? If I just look at this spiral again, so whatever software we have developed in the first cycle, that is one module. And whatever the new requirements you have taken from the customer, okay, that is a depend on the previous model. So whatever we have already implemented, the new requirement should be depend on the previous one, because on top of this software, we are developing the new requirement. Understood, guys, right? So whatever we have implemented already, the new requirement should be implemented on top of the existing software. So there should be some dependency. Okay, so suppose the customer is given 10 requirements, we have implemented all 10 requirements here, and again customer gave another requirement that should be on top of the existing requirement. That means there is a dependency. There is a dependency. I'll just say simple example, guys. Suppose just look at the Gmail. Okay, so in the Gmail application, I have one feature called compose email. Okay, so I have a feature called compose email. So I open the compose email, I have put all the email subject, I have entered some body and sent. Mail is sent. So till that, that is one module. Let us assume that is one module. After sending the email, that mail should come to the outbox. Okay, there is one more box, outbox, whatever emails, or we can say send box. So whatever emails you have sent, that should be stored in the another box, that is called, we can say, send mail box. Okay, and that is a different module. So the first module is a compose email, the second module is a send email box. So whatever mails you already sent, that should be stored in the another box. So this is called as a dependency. Until unless you send an email, that cannot be saved in another folder, right? So that is called as a dependency. So first the customers given some requirements we have implemented, and whatever requirement is newly given, that should be depending on the existing requirement. So in that case, we can use spiral model. So that is a one of the points. So we follow spiral model whenever there is a dependency on the models. And the next point is, in every cycle, new software will be released to the customer. As I said, as soon as we completed one cycle, like requirement analysis, design, coding, testing, but internally, in every cycle, we follow SDLC process. Again, same waterfall model we are following, but the same waterfall model we are following in different cycles. So that is a small difference between waterfall model and spiral model. And in waterfall model, we don't have different cycles, but here in each and every cycle, we are following the waterfall model. Okay. So in every cycle, new software will be released to the market or released to the customer. So software will be released in multiple versions. So it is also called version control model. As I said, once we get the requirements, we do all the process, requirement analysis, design, coding, testing, and deliver the one version of software to the customer. And then we will start with the new requirements. So software will be released in multiple versions. So it is also called as version control model. Okay, so these are the few important points which you have to remember for spiral model. So now let us discuss the advantages and disadvantages. So first let us discuss the advantages. So what are the advantages? In interior perspective, these are very important, guys. So even though we are not working on these models nowadays, but if you go for interview, people will ask some questions on this. You have to remember a few important points. Okay, so advantage of spiral model. So what are the advantages? So as I said before, testing is done in every cycle before going to the next cycle. So here testing is done in every cycle before going to the next cycle. What does that mean? Again, if you just look at the picture, in every cycle, we have all the phases. Like in every cycle, we are following waterfall again. Requirement, design, coding, testing. That is one cycle. Again, requirement, design, coding, testing, second cycle. And again, requirement, design, coding, testing, fourth cycle. So in every cycle, we have a testing. In every cycle, we have a testing. That is one of the advantage. So testing is done in every cycle before going to the next cycle. Okay, after complete, in each and every cycle we conduct testing once. So testing is done in every cycle before going to the next cycle. The next one is customer will get to use the software for every module. What does it mean? Customer no need to wait for the full-fledged software, and whatever the initial requirements they have given, we can develop the requirements and test it, and we'll give the software to the customer, and he will work on the software parallelly. We'll get another requirement from the customer, new requirement from the customer, and again we can start another cycle. So customer is no need to wait till we complete the entire process or entire software. Okay, that is another point. So customer will get to use the software for every module. After completion of every cycle, we are releasing the software to the customer, so he can start using that software. Customer no need to wait till end. And the last advantage is requirement changes are allowed. This is one of the important point. In the waterfall model, the requirements changes are not allowed in the middle of development process, but here requirement changes are allowed after every cycle, and requirements changes are allowed, but when after completion of the cycle, not in between the cycle. Understood? So in the waterfall model, also we do the same thing. In waterfall model, suppose we are in the testing phase. Can we allow the changes in requirements? We cannot allow here. But in the spiral model, we can accommodate the changes. But when we can accommodate after completion of the entire cycle or before starting the next cycle, we can accommodate the new requirement. But in the middle of the cycle, we cannot accommodate. Okay. After completion of the cycle, we can accommodate the new changes. We can implement the new changes or new requirement. But in the middle of the phases, in the middle of the cycle, we cannot accommodate. So requirement changes are allowed after every cycle before going to the next cycle. But in the middle of the cycle, we cannot accommodate the new requirements. So these are the advantages of spiral model. Now we'll see the disadvantages of spiral model. Disadvantages. Requirement changes are not allowed in between the cycle. So requirement changes are allowed when we have to allow the requirement changes after completion of the cycle. But in the middle of the cycle or in between the cycle, we cannot allow the new requirements. So that is one disadvantage. Every cycle of spiral model looks like a waterfall model. Again, the waterfall model is involved here. As I said before, every cycle we are doing requirement analysis, design, testing, design, coding, and testing. So the same activities are going on in every cycle. So internally, in each and every cycle, again, we follow the waterfall model. And there is no testing in requirement and design phase. If I just look at this cycle, here also we have only one phase of testing in every phase, in every cycle. So if I just look at one cycle, we have only one phase of testing, but we don't have any testing in the design phase or requirement phase. Okay. And there are chances are there to get the more number of bugs in the testing phase. So because in the previous phases, we don't have testing, only we have one phase of testing in one cycle. So that is one of the another drawback. So based on these two drawbacks, again, another models are coming into market because every model is having pros and cons. So spiral model can overcome some of the drawbacks from waterfall model. Similarly, some other models can overcome the drawbacks from spiral model. Okay. So there is no testing in the requirement and design phase. Okay. So these are the disadvantages in spiral model. Requirement changes are not allowed in between the cycle. After completion of the cycle, it is allowed, but in between the cycle, it is not allowed. Every cycle of spiral model looks like a waterfall model because we have only one phase of testing in every cycle and we don't have testing in every phase. That is a drawback. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of spiral model. So these two are very old and traditional models. So nowadays, most of the companies are not following these models, but still we need to understand what exactly these models and what are the advantages and disadvantages. Okay. Now I'm talking about a new model, which is V model. So in that particular model, we can overcome all the drawbacks from waterfall model and spiral model. Okay. So prototype is one of the model which is also available and which comes between waterfall and spiral model. So prototype is also one of the SDLC model which is there, which comes between waterfall model and spiral model. But in waterfall model, we cannot accommodate frequently changes requirement, right? Suppose if you are there in the testing phase, we cannot accommodate the new requirement. But in the prototype model, we can accommodate the new requirement in the middle, in somewhere in the development process. But there is no iteration in the prototype model. There is no iteration. Okay, so we can just get a small requirement from the customer. We no need to get the complete requirement from the customer. And as soon as you know few requirements, we can do requirement analysis on those requirements and design, coding, testing, and deliver the software to the customer. One prototype. Okay, and after that again customer will look at that prototype. Prototype is a sample. Okay, let me just give you some points here. So prototype, I think Rahman, somebody is asked what is prototype. So maybe you can hear this term. So prototype model, let me just explain what it is. So prototype is a, we can say blueprint of the software. Blueprint of the software is called as a prototype. Okay, what you will do is in prototype model, normally what you will do is, so first we will get the initial requirements from the customer. First we will get the initial requirements from the customer. Customer can have n number of requirements, but initial requirements we will get from the customer. And after that, we don't develop the complete software. We will develop the prototype. Prototype is nothing but a sample, a blueprint of the software. And we will show this prototype to the customer. We will explain this prototype to the customer. Okay. If the customer is satisfied with this prototype, then we will start design, coding, testing, and different phases. So prototype is nothing but a blueprint of the software. And we will take initial requirement from the customer and we will just prepare some prototype model. Suppose, let me just give you some example of what is prototype. Suppose before constructing the house, guys, so we will have some plan in the paper. We will design the plan. That is just a blueprint. And what is another blueprint means? So just like a toys, we will construct the house, right? So if I see some movies and everywhere, so before constructing the actual house, we will see some kind of model house. So that is a simply prototype. So here we will get the initial requirement from the customer. We will develop a small prototype and we will demonstrate that to the customer. If the customer is satisfied with that prototype, then we will start design, coding, testing. Okay. So here the chances are there, the customer involvement will be more here, because every phase or in every step, the customer will give you the inputs. And based on that, we will design the prototype and continue the rest of the process. Okay. This particular model comes between waterfall and spiral model. So which is spiral is a advanced than prototype model. Okay. Because even prototype is also having some different drawbacks. So, and we are just skipping the prototype model because it is also having some drawbacks, which we can also overcome by using spiral model. Because if you have number of features, if you want to accommodate in prototype, it is not possible. Okay. So that is a prototype. So what is module? So module means a simple component of the software. For example, if I take email, okay, let me just take with some example. Let's say Gmail. I have taken Gmail application. Okay. Everyone know about Gmail, right? So what we can do in the Gmail? In the Gmail, what we can do? We can do the first login. After login, we can compose email. After composing, we can send an email. Or what we can do? We can receive an email. We can receive an email. And a lot of features we have. So we can do a lot of things. And if I just look at this, every feature, every functionality is a module. Okay, login. After login, we can compose a mail and we can check the inbox. We can check the mails which we have got. And this is one model. And we can compose a mail, that is one model. Sending a mail, that is another model. So every application features are divided into different parts. And those parts are basically called as modules. So entire software cannot be developed in one module, in one shot. Okay. So the entire software will be divided into multiple parts, which are called as a modules, and different type of developers works on different modules. Even single guy cannot develop everything. So the modules will be divided into multiple developers, and some group of developers work on one module, and another module, some other group of people will work. So module is nothing but a piece of software which contains a few number of functionalities from the application. Okay, similarly, if I take some banking application. So what are the different modules we have in the banking? Again, we'll start with the login part. Login is a one module, we can say. And after login, what are all things we can do in the banking application? So we can check the balance, right? This is one module. This is one piece of functionality. And we can do some fund transfer. This is one module. And then we can do fund transfer, balance check. And what else we can do? We can request the statement. We can request the statement. We can add payee. So these are all different modules in our application. So different module is nothing but some piece of software which contains some number of features, or we can say each feature is one module. Understood, everyone? So what is that module? So module is a part of the software. Entire software will be divided into multiple parts. So each module is called, each part is called as a module. Okay. So whatever functionality you can see in your application, we can consider that as a module. Okay. All right. So now let us move on to the next model, guys. So we have discussed about waterfall model, spiral model. Then we are moving to another model called V model. So prototype model is not that much important because this comes between waterfall and spiral. So first waterfall model and then prototype, and to overcome the problems from spiral and prototype, then spiral model come into picture. Okay. Now let us move on to the V model directly. So now I'm introducing one of the important model called V model. This is also called as VV model. VV model means verification and validation model. VV model, V model or VV model. Okay, so why it is called as a V model? Here VV means verification and validation. Okay, so why we are calling it as a V model? Because this model seems very similar to the V shape. Let me show you the picture how V model look like. So this is a V model. So this is most important, guys. Please look at this. Lot of things we have to know here. Lot of things are there. So first, let us understand this model, and then we will discuss advantages and disadvantages. Okay. All right. So V model. V model is also one of the software development process model, SDLC model, like waterfall model, spiral model. V model is also one of the software development process model. So let us try to understand. So what is this V model and how the activities will go on? Let us carefully listen. In the V model, if I just look at this picture, it seems very similar to the V shape, right? This is one part which is comes under verification. The other part is comes under the validation. So one side is completely verification part. The other side is completely validation part. Okay, that's the one thing. So let us try to understand what exactly it is. So this is a verification and validation. I'll tell you what is verification and validation. Just let us discuss this. So in the main specialty of the V model, the main specialty of the V model is in every phase, we will conduct the testing. So in every phase, we conduct the testing. What does that mean? In the requirement analysis phase, we do testing. In the design phase, we do testing. In development phase also, we do testing. In the testing phase also, we do testing. So in every phase of software development process, we do testing. So that is a specialty of the V model. So in every part of development process, we will conduct testing, but previously it was not there. In the waterfall model, if you look at here, so in the waterfall model, if I look at here, we have only one phase of testing. And even in the spiral model, we have only one phase of testing in every cycle. But now in V model, every phase we have testing. In requirement phase, we have a testing. In design phase, we will conduct testing. In the coding phase, we will conduct testing. In the testing phase also, we will do some testing. And every phase we have testing. So that is a specialty of the V model. So now if I just look at this, one part is verification, the other part is validation. Now, what is the first phase in the software development process? What is the first phase? Collecting the requirement from the customer. So here we have something called BRS, CRS, URS. What does that mean? Business requirement specification, or customer requirement specification, or users requirement specification. So the terminology is different, but the context is same. They are talking about one document, that is business requirement specification document. What exactly it is, what it contains. So basically this document contains the business requirements. What is business requirement? Means whatever the requirements are given by the customer or client will be noted in this BRS document. So who will prepare this document? Business unit. So in our companies, there will be a team called business unit. And those people will interact with the customer and they will collect the requirements and they will prepare the document. And this document more can be understandable by the business people, not from the technical people. So technical people cannot understand this document. It is very huge document, and customer and business unit, so these people involved in this document, so they will collect all the requirements and note down in one document. That is BRS, CRS, or URS. This is the first phase of software development process. Now observe this. So this particular document, based on this document, we conduct one testing called user acceptance testing. Okay, I'll talk about this in detail. So for now, just understand this document is going to be input for user acceptance testing. We can call it as a UAT testing. UAT means user acceptance testing will be conducted based on this document. Remember this. Now, the next phase, this is the first phase. Now the second phase. But this is a document cannot be understandable by the developers or testers. Okay. So we need a document which contains some more technical details. So based on this document, there will be another document will be prepared, that is SRS document, software requirement specification document. Okay, so in the coming sessions, I will show you all these documents, how these documents will be prepared, how these documents look like. Okay. So BRS, CRS, or URS, this document cannot be understandable by the technical people. Only business people can understand. But if you want to understand the requirement, you have to convert that into SRS. So SRS contains a more technical details. The same requirement, but it will be present in the technical format by using like data flow diagrams or Venn diagrams. So we use certain diagrams in the SRS, and technical people, especially developers and testers, can understand. So that's the next document. And SR, based on the SRS document, the designers will prepare HLD and LLD document. High level design documents, low level design documents. This is the third section. HLD and LLD. HLD means what? High level design document, which contains the main modules of the application. LLD means low level modules of application. So as we discussed, what is module means? Module means a piece of functionality in the application. So here, the entire application will be divided into main modules. Again, each module is divided into some sub modules. So those sub modules, which is called as a low level design. So in HLD document, we will have main modules. In LLD, we have low level modules. So SREs is also prepared by the project managers or product managers. So normally this first phase business unit people will be involved, BU people, and SRS document will be prepared by product manager, or we can say project manager, PM, we can say PM. Okay, they will write these requirements. And HLD and LLD documents will be prepared by the designers. HLD and LLD documents will prepare by the designers. Right? This is just a documentation which contains a different pictures, and diagrammatic picture, they will represent the software. So HLD contains the main modules. LLD contains the low level modules. The main modules will be divided into multiple sub modules, and then coding will start. So design requirement module. So first two phases, 1, 2 comes under requirement phases, and 3 comes under design phase, and coding is a fourth stage. Here the development will start. Coding will start based on the documents. Okay, this is one part. Now come to the other side. This is all comes under verification. So as I said, one important point here. In the V model, in every phase, SRS means what? Software requirement specification. Okay, which is developed by, which is written by the product managers. Right. So if I just look at this, as I said, one important point, every stage we have a testing. In V model, in every stage we have a testing. Like requirement phase, we conduct testing, design phase, we conduct testing, and coding phase, we conduct testing. But where exactly we conduct testing? So in the first phase, as soon as we have done this document, business unit, we conduct, or the same team is conducting some reviews on the document. So here in this particular stages, whatever testing we are going to conduct, and who will conduct this testing? Again, not testers, okay? Every team member. Suppose in the BRS or in the first phase, whoever is prepared these documents and they are responsible for conducting the testing. So they review the document to ensure the correctness and completeness. So what they will review, the document is correct or not. So whatever the content they have mentioned in the document, which is correct or not. And if it is correct, then complete or not. All the requirements are mentioned in the document or not. So that will be verified. That is a kind of testing. We are not exactly testing the software. We are testing the documentation, because if the document is correct, the next phase will be easy, or there are no chance like next phase we will not get any bugs or any issues, because the next phase will follow based on the previous phase. So if here the document is very clear, correct and complete, then rest of the phases will go on. So in the first phase, while preparing BRS or CRS, URS, the BU team, the people who are involved in the BU, they will conduct some reviews on this document. And that is a kind of testing, review. And what is review means? Review means to ensure the document is correct and complete. Correctness and completeness of the document will be tested in the form of review. And the second stage, SRS document, LLD document, HLD, these are also documents. So we conduct some reviews on the documents to check whether they are correct or complete. So in that context, these phases also include testing in the form of reviews. We are not exactly testing the software. We are testing the documentation part. We are testing the documents. Okay, that is a review. Not only review, there are three other things also there. We call it as a, let me just write the notes. Okay, so here there are a lot of points are included, guys. So I'm talking about review, and also we have something called walkthrough. We also something called inspection. So actually these are the techniques for testing. So by using review or by using walkthrough, or we can by using inspection, we conduct testing on this documents. So BRS, SRS, HLD, LLD. So if you want to test these documents, we use either reviews, or we use some walkthrough, or we use some inspection. So these three are testing techniques to verify the documents. Okay, I'll discuss in detail, just hold on. So here I just mentioned only review, but actually there are three things we have. So review, walkthrough and inspection. So by using these three techniques, we will verify the documents, not exactly the software. Okay, so in that context, we have testing in every phase. We review the BRS document, we review the SRS, we review the HLD, we review the LLD, and in the coding part, actual software will be ready. So where exactly software is developing? In the coding phase. Until unless we enter into the coding phase, we just have only documents. So whatever testing we conduct on these documents, which is basically called as static testing techniques. So here understand this. Static testing techniques we are calling as a static testing. So what is static testing means? Testing the documents, testing the documents, testing the project related documents is called as static testing. Remember guys, very important. So testing the project related documents is called as static testing. So testing the project related documents in the form of reviews, walkthroughs, inspections is called as a static testing. Static means what? We are not exactly testing the software. We are just testing the documents in the form of reviews, walkthroughs, and inspections. In the form of reviews, walkthroughs, and inspection, we are testing the documents. So which is called as a static testing, which is called as a static testing. So remember guys, now comes under coding. Once the coding is started, slowly the software will be ready. So the coding will be done first. Some modules will be developed. And after developing multiple modules, they will integrate those modules. And after integration of the modules, we will conduct one more testing. So here in this side, if I just look at another side of validation, we can see 4 levels again: unit testing, integration testing, system testing, user acceptance testing. Okay, this part is called validation part. So what is unit testing means? Whatever the module which is developed by the developer, as I said before, the entire software will not be developed at one shot. The software will be divided into main modules and sub modules. So first developer will start developing the software with single module, a small single module. So whatever module which is developed by the developer, if you test that particular module, which is called as a unit testing. Simply we can say unit testing in the sense testing the single module or single component of your software, which is called as a unit testing. So who will conduct this unit testing? Developer himself should conduct the unit testing, because they know the coding part. They know how they have written the code. So they know exactly how the module is working. So the after completion of coding, first unit testing will be conducted by the developers. After that, they will integrate the modules. All the modules will be integrated and they will make one main module. Then we'll test that module, which is called as integration testing. So after completion of all the modules, we will conduct one more testing called integration testing. And after completion of integration, we'll conduct the integration testing. And these two, unit testing and integration testing, conducted by the developers itself. Because they know exactly how module works, because they are the developers. They are developed the code. So coding, after completion of coding, the submodules and main modules will be tested by the developers himself in the form of unit testing and integration testing. And these two testings, if you want to conduct these two testings, you have to know the coding part. Okay, you have to know the programming knowledge and what exactly developers are written inside the module. You have to understand that. But who can understand that? Testers doesn't have programming knowledge. So whoever is responsible for implementing or develop the modules, they are conducting this testing. Unit testing and integration testing will be conducting at the code level, which is called as a white box testing. Understand, guys? Whatever the testings we conduct on the code or submodules or main modules, which is called as white box testing techniques. So here unit testing and integration testing comes under white box testing techniques. Why we are calling white box testing techniques? Because we have to know internal logic of the programs. If you want to test the module, single module, we have to know what type of code the developers have written. So that's the reason these testings will not be conducted by the testers. These testings will be conducted by the developers himself. That's the reason we can call them as a white box testing. So white box testing means what? White box. If I just put white box, you know exactly what is there inside the box, right? So that is the reason. So white box testing means what? We have to know internal logic of the program and what is the program they have written for that model. So that will be known only by the developer. So they can conduct this testing. So after completion of the sub modules, they conduct unit testing on single module. And after integrating all the modules, they conduct integration testing, which is also done by the developers. After completion of integration testing, the final software will be ready. The final integrated software will be ready, and that software will be given to the testing team. Then system testing will be conducted by the testers. So here system testing phase will come into picture. So here the testers will involve to test the software. But what kind of testing they do? What is system testing here? Basically, they don't need to understand the code. They will just verify or test our software is working according to customer requirement or not. So what customer is expected, what are the flows we have, what is the functionality, whether it's working or not, that will be tested in the system testing phase. So here we don't need to understand the code. We don't need to have programming skill in the system testing phase. And actual testers are involved in the system testing phase. And rest of the testings will be done by the respective people. But in the system testing phase, whatever testing we are conducting done by the testers. Okay, we don't need programming knowledge here because we are getting the complete application. We don't know exactly what developer has written internally. We don't know the code. That is the reason we can call it as a black box testing technique. What is black box means? Black box means we don't know exactly what is inside the box, what is there inside the box, right? So system testing comes under black box testing technique because we don't know exactly what developer is written internally. We are just testing the application or testing the software, whether it is working according to customer requirement or not, whether it is satisfying the customer requirement or not. So as a user point of view, how functionality is working, I'll test that. So that comes under the system testing. That's the next level of testing. And the last phase is user acceptance testing. After completion of system testing, user or customer will do some kind of testing at their level. That is user acceptance testing. This is also done by the testers along with customers. UAT testing. And here also we don't need to understand the code. So which is also comes under black box testing. Okay. Now observe this carefully. Let us start with the BRS document. Then SRS will be prepared. Then HLD and LLDs will be prepared. So these first 1, 2, 3 phases are document level. So in each and every phase, we conduct testing in the form of reviews, walkthroughs, and inspections. So that is called as a static testing. Static testing in the sense testing the project related documents is called as a static testing. And what are the techniques we use? Review, walkthrough, inspection. So these are the 3 techniques we have to use to perform the static testing. Now the other side, if I just look at here, whatever testing we are doing here, unit testing, integration testing, system testing, user accept testing, where exactly we are doing this testing? On the software, because at the coding stage, the software will be developed. After developing the software, we are doing these kind of testings. So these kind of testings are called dynamic testing. Dynamic testing in the sense we are actually testing the softwares, not the documentation. Okay, so the dynamic testing means testing the actual software, testing the actual software. Okay, but in the static testing, we are testing the project related documents in the form of reviews, walkthroughs, and inspections. When you come to the dynamic testing, we are testing the actual software, but what are the techniques we are using here? We are using unit testing technique, and we are using integration testing. We are using system testing. We are using UAT testing, user acceptance testing. Okay, these are the different techniques which we have to use in dynamic testing. These are the techniques we use in static techniques. So in the V model, one side we can call as static testing. So just verifying the documentation part and verifying the actual software, which is called as a dynamic testing. Understood, guys? So static testing and dynamic testing, because until unless we enter into the coding part, actual software is not ready. And what is there for testing? Only documentation is there. So we review the document, SRS, HLD, LLD. So this is a kind of a testing. After completion of the coding, software will be ready. Then we'll conduct unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and UAT testing. So one side, the reviews, inspections, walkthroughs are comes under static testing techniques. And unit testing, integration testing, system testing, UAT testing comes under dynamic testing techniques, which is called as a dynamic testing techniques. And again, unit testing, integration testing, if you want to conduct, we have to know the coding part. We have to know the programming knowledge. We have to have the programming knowledge. So that is the reason we can call them as a white box testing technique. Integration testing, unit testing comes under white box testing, because we have to test what is there in that module, what kind of code they have. Basically, we are testing the code. not exactly application. We're testing the code. So the developers will conduct unit testing and integration testing. And after completion of integration testing, then testers will involve. What testers will do? Testers will perform system testing. And here actually we are verifying whether software is working according to customer requirement or not. So during the system testing, what testers will do? They will understand the requirements. They will write the test plan. They will write the test cases. They will execute the test cases. They will find the defects. They report the defects to the developer. So all these activities will be done during system testing phase. So that is a tester job. Actual testers will be involved during system testing phase. But integration testing, unit testing is also done by the developers because they have to know the code. So they know the coding part. So if you know the coding, then you can also do integration and unit testing. But as a tester, most of the time, we don't know exactly what developer has written internally. So that is the reason integration unit testing is always done by the developers and system testing will be done by the testers. And user acceptance testing will be done by the testers along with the users or customers. Because what is the end users here? End user is nothing but finally who is using the software. They are called the end users. So they have to know how to use the software. So they will also do some kind of testing before using that software in their environment. So testers also will help them, and collectively testers as well as customers sit together and do some kind of basic testing, which is comes under UAT testing, user acceptance testing. Okay, right. So we have understood one side, which is static testing. Other side is a dynamic testing. Now let us understand what is verification and validation. Let me just clear it. I already told you verification and validation. If I just look at this part is verification, this part is validation. This is very, very important question in interview, guys. Please focus on this. What is verification? What is validation? It again depends on these two things. Okay. So verification and validation. Observe this carefully. I'm writing some notes here. Verification and validation. What is the difference between verification and validation? So this is verification and validation. Let me put some important points. Okay. So verification checks whether we are building the right product. Verification checks whether we are building the right product. What does it mean? Verification, we are verifying each and every stage. If I just look at the V model, we prepare BRS document and we are checking the document is correct or not. Then again, we prepare SRS document. Again, we are checking which is correct or not, which is prepared well or not. And then HLD document, then LLD document. What exactly we are doing here? In every stage, we are checking each and every document is correctly written or completely written or not. And this is called as a verification. So verification means what? Checks whether we are building the right product. Whatever we are doing is correct or not. Suppose what is our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to develop some product, to develop the application. To develop this application, we have to follow certain process, like different stages we have to follow. I'll say stage 1 and then stage 2 and then stage 3 and so on. So then we will finally achieve the application. We finally will develop the application. So what verification is representing? Whatever activities we are doing in every phase, which are correct or not, we are doing correctly or not, we are implementing the product correctly or not, that comes under the verification part. Okay, each and every verification, everyone can do that. Everyone can do that verification. Suppose if I give some document to you, you can verify that. And if I give some document to the developer, developer can verify that. So anyone can do the verification. So what is meant by verification? Whatever activities we are doing in every phase are correct or not, we are doing correctly or not, that is verification. So if I just look at the definition once again, so here verification checks whether we are building the right product. Whether we are building the right product means what? We are doing correctly or not. We are following proper process correctly or not. Each and every step we are verifying. And here we mainly focus on the documentation. Okay, in the verification, we are mainly verify the documentation. Where verification comes under, when verification come into picture, if you have some document, I'll verify that. So verification always focus on documentation. And if I just look at this picture once again, in this particular stage, BRS, SRS, HLD, and LLD. So these are all documents. These are all documents. We are conducting testing on these documents. So this is comes under the verification part. We are checking each and every document is right or wrong. We are checking each and document is having proper content or not. So that is verification. So these phases are comes under verification. That's the first thing. So verification checks whether we are building the right product or not, and focus on the document. And verification typically involves again reviews, walkthroughs, inspection. Whatever the static testing techniques we have used, the same techniques we'll use in verification also. Same thing. So this comes under verification. So static testing techniques will be used in verification process. Okay, these two are interrelated. So verification checks whether we are building the right product. It mainly focus on the documentation, and we use static testing techniques to perform the verification because it is a document. Now come to the validation. The other side, if I just look at this, the validation. When to perform validation? Once the software is ready. Here we are actually testing the software. During unit testing, integration testing, system testing, UAT testing. What exactly you are testing here? We are testing the software. Once the coding is completed, software is ready. So we are testing the software. So what is validation means? Validation checks actual software working according to customer requirement or not. So if I just look at the definition, validation checks whether we are building the product right. Small difference, guys. So validation checks whether we are building the product right. Whatever product we already built, which is right or not, that we are checking here. But in the verification, checks whether we are building the right product. But here we are product is not ready yet. Product is not yet ready. We are just checking the documentation. Are we building the product correctly or not? Whatever steps we are involving is correctly going or not. That is the verification part. But once you come to the validation part, product is ready. The software is developed. And whatever the software is developed, which is right or right, which is right or not, which is working according to customer requirement or not. So that we are testing during validation. So before software is ready, we conduct verification. After software is ready, then we do validation. Okay, and takes place after verifications are completed. If I just look at this picture once again, after verification phases are completed, then validation phases are started. Unit testing, integration, system, user acceptance. So these testings are comes under validation, and which is focus on the software, not the documentation. Verification focus on the documentation. So we use static testing techniques, review, walkthrough, and inspection. But validation focus on the software, not the documentation. So we use dynamic testing techniques. So whatever the dynamic testing techniques we use, the dynamic testing techniques we use to conduct the validation. So this is dynamic testing belongs to validation. Static testing is belongs to verification. Okay. So validation checks whether we are building the product right, because by the time product is already built. So whatever the product is built, which is working according to customer requirement or not, which is working properly or not, we are validating it. In that context, we are saying validation. So focus on the software, and verification mainly focus on the documentation part. And so here again, if you come to this picture, white box testing and black box. So again, in 4 different stages, unit testing and integration testing comes under white box. White box means what? We have to know internal logic of the program. So they are exactly testing the code. They are exactly testing the code, not the application. So which is called as a unit testing and integration testing. And then next level of testing is system testing. After that, next level of testing is user acceptance testing. And unit testing, integration testing is done by the developers, system testing is done by the testers, user acceptance testing is done by the testers as well as users or customers. Okay, so this is a one part is called verification, other part is validation. So verification means what? We are exactly testing the documents in the form of reviews, walkthroughs and inspections, which is basically called as a static testing techniques. And in the validation, we are exactly testing the actual software in the form of dynamic testing techniques. What are they? Unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and user acceptance testing. So these are the validation techniques, validation techniques or dynamic testing techniques. So these terms are interrelated, guys. If anyone asks you what is the difference between static testing and dynamic testing, what is the difference? Static testing means we exactly testing the documents in the form of reviews, walkthroughs, and inspections. So what is the dynamic testing means? We're actually testing the software by using unit testing technique, integration, system, and user acceptance testing. And similarly, what is the difference between verification and validation? Verification means we are exactly testing the documents, whether we are following right process or not. That is verification part. And we will mainly focus on the documentation. Once you come to the validation, we are exactly testing the software, validating the software by giving different inputs and observing the outputs. Because by the time software is ready, so we do validation part. So actually testing the software by giving different inputs and getting the output and observing the output, whether it is working according to customer requirement or not. That is a validation. So unit testing, integration testing, system user acceptance testing, these testings comes under the validation part, verification and validation. So verification will be done before software is ready. Validation will be done after software is ready, after completion of software development. Okay, so static testing is related to verification, dynamic testing is related to validation. Static, the name itself is saying static means what? Documents are always static. Dynamic means always changing. So software is always keep on changing as soon as we added some code or remove our code. So dynamically we can provide some input to the software, we can get some output from the software, and we can validate that output. So that is a dynamic testing. Okay, so these are all important terms which we need to understand from the V model. So if I just look at the advantages and disadvantages of V model, let me just put here, and I will also discuss this in detail, guys, in the next sessions. What are the levels of testing, UAT testing, system testing? So advantages are testing is involved in each and every phase, and disadvantages are documentation is more, because everything is a documentation, and initial investment is also more. That is a disadvantage of V model. Why initial investment is more? Why initial investment is more? Because in the V model, all the people have to hide in the beginning itself, along with the developer and testers. And one more important point, guys, here's the activities will go parallel. Suppose if I coding is there and unit testing will be conducted, on what basis, and after completion of unit testing, integration testing will be conducted. So what is the input of integration testing? These people will refer this document. LLD and HLD documents are having main modules and sub modules. So in integration testing, what you will do, we are checking the communication between the modules, and those modules are interacting properly or not, inputs are properly taking or not, are we getting proper output or not. So these things will be validated during integration testing. And what is the input document we need here is HLD and LLD documents. Similarly, as a tester, I don't know the coding part, but I have to test the application. But how we will test the application without having input? Before that, you need to understand the customer requirement, how application will behave, what are the functionalities and features are available in the application. You have to know that. But from where we will get that information? We need SRS document. That's the input document for us to perform system testing. Similarly, to perform user acceptance testing, they will refer BRS document. So in every stage of testing, we need some input. Okay, so here the another disadvantage is initial investment is more. Why? Because in every phase, suppose in the first phase, reviews, in the sense everybody will conduct the reviews. Reviews, walkthroughs, inspection means developers as well as testers. Everybody will involve in that. So in that case, we have to hire the people at the beginning itself. So before starting the software development itself, we have to have developers and testers. But in waterfall model is not like that. After completion of few number of phases, the testers will be hired. But here, the testers and developers will be there from the beginning of software development process. So that is the reason cost is high. Initial investment is more because we have to pay them from the beginning itself. And documentation will be there in each and every phase. That takes a lot of time. Preparation of document is not simple thing. It takes a lot of time to document each and everything. So these are the disadvantages in V model. And advantages, in every phase, we have a testing involved. So that is the reason in the coming phases, there are less number of chances are there to get the bugs. So in system testing, because once we reach this level, already different levels of testing is done. So very less number of chances are there to get the bugs in the later stages. Okay. So these are the advantages of V model. So these are the three models comes under SDLC. We have discussed about waterfall model, then spiral model, and then V model. Okay. So understood guys. So let me just write some notes. Okay, so we have let me open the document. So we have discussed what is SDLC, what is software development lifecycle. Basically, it is a process, step-by-step process which you have to follow to develop the software. And what it includes requirement analysis, design, coding, testing, deployment, and maintenance. That is SDLC. And waterfall model, spiral model, V model. So these three are SDLC models. You can call them as a SDLC models. And we have also discussed about static and dynamic testing. So static testing means what? We are testing the documents in the form of reviews, walkthroughs, and inspections. Dynamic testing means what? We are actually testing the software. Unit testing, integration testing, system testing, UAT testing comes under dynamic testing. Again, verification means what? We are checking whether we are following correct process or not. We are documenting correct or not. Documents are right or wrong. That is verification. Will be done before software is ready. And once the software is ready, we do validation. Means what? Whether software is working according to requirement or not. By giving different inputs, observing the outputs from the software, we are doing validation. Okay. So white box and black box testing. So white box testing in the sense, unit testing and integration testing. So in these two types of testing, we don't know exactly, we have to know exactly what is there inside the model. The coding part we have to know. So that's the reason only developers can do the testing. So white box testing means unit testing and integration testing comes under white box. And black box testing means what? System testing and user accept testing. We don't need to know the coding part. Just we need to know the functionality of the application. The customer requirement we have to know. In that case, we can do black box testing. Okay. So understand this, and rest of the things I will discuss in the next session. QA, QC, and QE. I'll put that point here. Okay. So rest of the things we will continue tomorrow, and just understand till here, and I'll also provide the notes. Okay. So I'll stop here for today. If you have any queries, you guys can ask me now.